You know, coding used to feel like grinding through the hardest levels with absolutely no cheat codes. You know that feeling. You would spend weeks on a project getting stuck on bugs or features, and you would never end up actually finishing anything. But nowadays, with this huge AI wave of vibe coding, there's this actual cheat code for developers now. If you use something like Cursor correctly, because this weekend I speed ran building an entire application. We are talking from idea to working product in 48 hours. And just like in gaming, once you know these cheat codes, what used to be impossible will become insanely easy. So, what did I build? Well, this is painpoint.space. Now, this thing searches through Reddit for business ideas using AI. You can go ahead and analyze subreddits and find patterns in people's complaints and get business ideas from real validated problems. And I essentially built this entire thing in one weekend, just using 5 specific cheat codes that completely broke my normal development process. And I'm about to show you these exact cheat codes. And fair warning, once you start using this, you're going to wonder why you ever coded any other way. So let's kick it off with cheat code number 1. You want to front load the strategy. Here's the thing about most weekend projects. We all get very excited about the idea, and then we immediately just start coding away. But what if I told you that if you were to just spend maybe the first couple hours not even coding at all, you could code 10 times faster? Now, I've been a developer for over the past 6 years, and have always enjoyed building these projects on the weekend. But this time, I decided to approach things a little bit differently. I would approach it like how I do at my day job, and I started with a product requirements document. Now, I know this sounds very corporate-y and slightly boring, but stay with me for a second, because the pain point I was scratching was actually my own. I kept hearing people say, use Reddit to find business ideas because they share all of their problems on there. But you know, every single time I would hear this and I would try, I had absolutely no idea where to start. What subreddits? How do you analyze thousands of comments? That's why I wanted to build something that would let me quickly search multiple subreddits and then use AI to help me find these patterns that all of these people were complaining about. But instead of just jumping into VS Code, I spent dedicated time researching the idea, creating that product requirements document, taking screenshots of designs that I actually liked, and I would build a complete design systems with all of the colors, typographies, and everything else. But the biggest mindset shift here is treating planning as part of the development process, not separate. So with that, let's get into cheat code number 2, the sandbox with rules. Here's what I've realized about all of these coding tools like Cursor. Most people think AI should do all of the work. Well, that's actually pretty backwards, because AI is incredible if you give it clear boundaries and specific tasks. But it's also terrible if you just say something like, build me an app. So after I had my requirements and my design systems, I broke down everything into these user stories. Then I took those user stories and I created a development checklist with specific phases. And it went something like this. Let's say phase 1, set up Next.js frontend. Phase 2, configure Node.js backend with Supabase. And phase 3, go ahead and integrate that Reddit API. This way, each phase had a clear bite-sized task that I could hand to Cursor. But here's the key, no pun intended. I also indexed all of the important documentation for Next.js, Node.js, and Supabase into the context of the Cursor settings. This way, when Cursor was helping me write all that code, it knew exactly how these technologies worked with the most up-to-date information. The AI wasn't doing all of the thinking. Essentially, what I was doing was creating this sandbox of rules, and I would just let AI play in it and rapidly build within those constraints. So with that, cheat code number 3, validate and push often. Now, we all know this method. After each phase, I would validate and I would push code, but not just push to Git. I would actually test everything worked before moving on to the next phase. Now, of course, this might seem very obvious, but when you're moving fast, that temptation to just keep going happens to the best of us. But here's what this approach did. Because by the end of the weekend, I had an app that basically had zero major issues. There was no long debugging sessions that would last hours. No why isn't this working moments. The foundation was so solid because I would incrementally build and validate each layer before adding on the next one. Cheat code number 4, design is going to be your North Star. Now, most developers, they design as they code, but that's essentially trying to build a house while you're still drawing the blueprints for it. And when I created this design system up front, we're talking about the colors, the typography, the layout patterns. It eliminated so much decision fatigue during that development phase. Because every time I was building a component, I knew exactly what it should look like. No stopping to think, what color should this button be? Or how should this form be laid out? The design document would essentially answer all of those questions before I wrote a single line of code. And that's because I took screenshots of other apps that I liked, and I essentially just extracted those color schemes that I liked, so I wasn't even starting from a blank canvas. I was building on these proven design patterns already. And finally, cheat code number 5. Think product, not just code. Because the biggest cheat code is this. I approached this entire weekend like a principal engineer, not just someone who was messing around with code. That meant thinking about the user experience, the business problems, the technical architecture as they were one connected system. Because when you think product first, you make different decisions. You tend to just focus on what the user actually needs and not just something that's technically interesting to build. You plan for how all of these pieces are actually going to fit together instead of just sitting here at the end just hoping everything kind of works out. And honestly, this approach feels a lot like just rocket fuel because I've built these weekend projects before that would take weeks and I never ended up launching anything. But this time by Sunday, I had something I was extremely proud of and I was ready to share it with the world. So here's what I ended up with, painpoint.space. This is going to analyze those Reddit comments I was talking about earlier, and it is going to find business opportunities for me. Now, I can go ahead and search for single subreddits, multi-subreddits, or maybe even just individual posts. And the cool thing is AI will find these patterns in people's pains for me, and it will help me generate these business ideas from those validated problems. But this is the most insane part about this whole thing. Because with AI tools making it so easy to build these applications, essentially if you have an ounce of a developer background, the real bottleneck at the end of the day isn't going to be coding anymore. It's knowing what to build and how to approach it systematically. So if you want to try painpoint.space for yourself, it's live right now. I'll link it down in the comments below. And I'm curious, what is your biggest frustration with any weekend project? Do they maybe take forever to finish? Or do you start building before you really know what you're actually making? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.